Welcome to the Post-Pandemic Freedom Show brought to you by Bold Molders. I'm Dr. Wayne Buchanan here with,
Joshua Shaffron, fellow bold molder.
and we are continuing our series on unpacking the big picture ideas that are here as part of the path to becoming a bold molder. I know last time we talked about the three blind spots. Where are we going with this next idea, Josh?
Well, I'm sure people have heard in one way, shape, or form the concept of there's things that we know, there's things that we know that we don't know, and then there's things that we don't know that we don't know, right? And
Hmm.
the major categories. And when first heard this concept, it was, I don't know, 30 years ago, 25 years ago at any rate, maybe close to 30 years ago. And the way that it was explained to me was that all the stuff that we don't know, that's where all of the miracles, the magic lives in our life, that we can create what we want to create, and live the life that we want to live, is in all of the stuff that we don't know that we don't know. And I don't know whether this has been defunct or not, but the common story or cliche back then was to explain this was, by all known laws of aerodynamics, uh, a bumblebee can't fly. Yet somebody forgot to tell the bumblebee that it couldn't fly, and so there it is. So either a miracle's happening, or the bumblebee knew something about aerodynamics that we didn't know. Now, I don't know whether that's been defunct or not, but the concept still holds true that there's a whole bunch of stuff that we don't know. And I like to look at it now, after teaching it that way for such a long time. I come at it from a different perspective, from the outside in. So let's go back over to our makeshift whiteboard here with my iPad, and
Yeah, I was definitely hearing the echoes of the unconscious in those unknown unknowns going,
right,
oh,
right.
wait.
And actually, we'll pull it all together and wrap it up so that
Nice.
the three blind spots, along with the unconscious, making the unconscious conscious, as well as how all of this kind of falls into play, and how it relates. Like, why should you even care? Is because this is all about living that life that you've been called to live, that you want to live, that you haven't been living, that you, um, for whatever purpose, maybe you're scared, maybe you're just feeling stuck or whatever, that you can live that life of freedom on your terms, however you choose to have it be. So, just my favorite quote is, until you make the unconscious conscious, it'll direct your life and you'll call it fate. Carl Jung. So let's look at this from the great unwashed masses. Now, I know that this is hard to see, and I did that on purpose, that there's, and this is a dotted line here, but this circle represents all of the infinite possibilities, the infinite omnipresent, all that is, the all of everything, right? So this is all of the unknown, unknown unknowns, right? And if I could write better, that would be great. But basically, what's going on is that the all of everything. If we think about the entire universe, you can call it God, you can call it source energy, but all that is, that all that is. Now, I made this look like it's a container, but it really isn't, right? Because it's all of everything. There's nothing that isn't a part of the all that is, that isn't infinite and omnipresent. And guess what? It's always expanding. It's always growing, right? So it's in everything. It is everything. It's all of everything. You
I
got
just
some
had that
thoughts?
moment of, even if you think you know it, guess what? The universe is expanding and there's more to know that you didn't know that you didn't know.
Right. So all of that last group of stuff that we were talking about, the stuff that you don't even know that you don't know, that's this, right? It's the infinite possibilities. It's the
Hmm.
all that is, and it's always growing, it's always expanding. There isn't anything that it isn't. Then on top of that, we have a projection of the stuff that we know that we don't know, right? Well, it's impossible for us as from this perspective to interpret, to understand, to absorb all that is from that higher perspective because we're within the perspective, right? So we, by definition, have to take a smaller piece of the puzzle. We have to take a smaller piece of it. So we project onto the screen, so to speak. And if we call this a screen, then we're projecting this piece onto it. And this represents the stuff that we believe that we know that there's some stuff that we don't know. You know what? Let's just do this piece and then it'll start to fall into place. So this represents, and maybe I'll change the color now. This represents the stuff that we know that we know. So notice, out of all the infinite and omnipresent possibilities of all of everything that is what it is, then we have the stuff that we chunk it down even more, a little bit more into this area, right? So we take a small little sliver of all that is, and then within that, we take a small little sliver of that, and that's what we know. That's what we're comfortable with. That's what we're familiar with. That's what we understand to be our reality, right? But does that change any of this? Does that change any of this? Does that change the fact that this is expanding outwards? Does that change any of that? Does it change that it's infinite and that is, as it always is constantly expanding, that the instant that it expands, the all of everything includes that, right? Does our little segment of that change any of the things going on outside of it? No, right? It still exists, but we're now living in a very restricted, constricted point of view, or a place of limitation, and because we are trying to figure out or live within that identity, but who we are is right here. It's within this area. We're willing to accept that there's some stuff that we know that we don't know, like we're aware of it consciously, but here is all of the unconsciousness, right? The unconscious awareness of all the infinite possibilities that are always expanding and always present there. What's your 2 cents on this, Wayne?
I mean, it makes sense that we've got parts we know, or at least think we know, and parts that we're aware that we don't know, and then all the rest of it's out there. It's anything that's not gray or green is definitely in that unconscious. So I don't usually take the woo-woo cosmological approach, but let's keep going because I think that you've got the more down-to-earth aspect coming up here.
Well, basically, what this represents is the Z is the infinite and omnipresent possibilities, the unknown, the unknown unknowns. Y represents the stuff that we know that we don't know, but it's based on the stuff that we know within our reality right there. So if we break it down in terms of just on a general level, X is what we believe is the bullseye here, is within there, is what we perceive that we know or we know. And these are what I call the boss Fred rules, or the Fred stories, all of these unconscious conditioned stories that are running us, that are sets of stories and scripts and rules that we live by. And this spot is what life looks like for us. In our perspective, that's reality. That's what we believe is reality. Then we've got the projected known unknowns. In other words, we're projecting on top of that. We're projecting out that this is the stuff that we know that we don't know, but it's always from within the framework of what we know that we know, right? So it's always from that perspective, which means that by definition, the stuff that we're looking for that's we think will make the difference is based upon what we believe is the truth of the absolute, unpenetrable, unbending, absolute reality of what is for us right now. But in reality, it's such a limited piece of the truth of all that is that we've decided through the rules, through the scripts, that that is what it is, right? And then the Z is the objective reality of the truth, the infinite and omnipresent unknown unknowns, which is that infinite means that it is everything, and omnipresent means that it's in everything. It's the potential. Now, if you're not particularly interested in the spiritual aspects of things or the more woo-woo aspects, that's fine. There's just a whole lot of potential that what we believe to be true is not ironclad, because the truth is immutable. The truth is indivisible. You can't break it up into smaller pieces. It's the whole. So the only way that you can look at the whole is from the perspective of Z, right? So if we break it down into more concrete terms, if what we believe is the issue or the problem, then based upon what we believe we're trying to accomplish, what we're trying to do, and what we think those challenges are, if we believe that it is this, then based on that, we're going to do Y activities. We're going to look for solutions that are based on what we think the problem is. But what if the problem that we're trying to solve isn't really this problem, it's this problem? And in fact, the act of looking to solve the problem that we believe it is, by doing this, that these Y actions is actually making the Z problem more painful for us. Now, I explained this in a different way in the previous episodes when we talked about the graph, and the one that's behind me on the whiteboard, and the one that's also there, and how the 3 blind spots. But that's exactly what's going on. We think the problem is X, and so we're doing Y things, and you know what, to solve for X, and it makes good sense. I mean, that if the problem really was X, that it makes good sense that we're looking for the answers in those areas of Y. Unfortunately, the real issue is Z. It's completely outside of what we thought it was, and trying to solve the wrong problem, i.e., what's in our comfort zone, what's in that constricted space, that limited space, is actually making the pain worse, making the suffering worse, making it harder to see the real root cause and the real problem, and treat the cause and cure the root cause of the problem rather than a symptom, which is what we've been doing up to this point. Now, that's in a general sense. Obviously, we've got to break it down to the specifics, but I'm now have brought this to you from 3 or 4 different directions, because it is such a it's an unconscious scenario to grasp a hold of, and hopefully coming at it from different angles will give each person a different way, but hearing it from a different angle will hopefully allow it to make sense in a different way. What do you got to say about that?
Yeah, I'm reminded of the whole parable of the man under the light post looking for his lost keys, and someone comes along and says, "Oh, what's going on? I'm looking for my keys." "Oh, great, let me help you. Where were you when you lost them?" "Oh, over there." "What? Why are you looking here?" "Well, the light's better here." So, yeah, that
That's
sort
yeah,
of the keys may be over in Z, but I'm going to stand over here in X because the light's better. I'm more familiar with this.
yeah. Say it again. I'll point.
Hopefully they can follow
Yeah,
along.
yeah. I think you nailed it. So,
Yeah.
um, that's my 2 cents, and I know that was rather heady and from I don't know what to call it. It's not wooey wooey so much as it's just a big concept to grasp. It's and the reason it's a big concept to grasp is that we we're not God. We're not we're looking at it from a perspective within the all of everything,
Hmm.
and from our perspective. But we need to understand that a perception is subjective. It is not objective. It is not the whole thing, and it is not the only thing. So we need to know that it's suspect, and that by suspect meaning that our filters are creating what we're allowing ourselves to look for and allowing ourselves to actually see. And we'll get into the tune, look, see aspects of things in a future episode. So I'm doing a little teaser
I
for
like
you
that.
there.
So we'll tee that up, but then in the meantime, what are folks doing today to really apply this concept?
Look for areas of your life where you see the XYZ aspects going, where how have you limited yourself based upon what you believed is the your known knowns, the things that you know, and then how did that then direct you? What were the things that you allowed yourself to look for, and how is that limited? And was there some potential, was there a situation that you could see in your life where you it's like going to the mailbox with a blindfold on. Like I go to the mailbox every day. It's not, but suddenly I put a blindfold on, and I lose my confidence. I lose the certainty. I get, there's lots of doubt because I don't know where I'm going. Well, was there some times where you resisted that because it was easier to stay in the area of the known knowns, and just observe it. Just look at, and have it not mean anything. Have it not define you. Have it say like grab your white lab coat and pretend you're a scientist and your clipboard and say, the things, isn't that interesting? And just look at it as it's just something that happened. It didn't say anything about me as a person or anything of that nature. And just notice it. And I find that when I write things down in a journal, on a yellow legal pad, or on my iPad, when I write it down, that it gives me the opportunity to get objective with it. Because at first, when I'm writing it, it's just I'm spilling it out, and it's I'm in the moment, in the experience. I'm just like it's just happening, and I'm very subjective. I'm very much in the moment, and this is truth for me. But the act of writing it down, now I can look at it and say, well, is that true or whatever? And now I can evaluate it and look at it and say, what were the feelings or what was the emotions that got triggered for that in me? And I'll let you in on a big tip here is anytime you have a strong emotional reaction, whether that be quote unquote positive or quote unquote negative, that's a sure sign that you've got some joy to look at in terms of the unconscious conditioning. That the reason why you're having a strong emotional reaction is because of unconscious conditioning. I promise you. That's why you're there, and you're automatically reacting to it because you're reacting to your reactions, and that's where the emotion comes from. It comes from the juice that gets created through that. And that we'll be unpacking it in much more depth in a much future episode down the road a piece.
Yeah. All right. So, as usual, you can start with your past and notice events that happened before and try and find those XYZs where you thought it was X, so you did Y, but really maybe it was Z, and the Y was
And if
actually
it
making things
was
worse.
right,
So,
how did the actions that we were doing to solve for it that made good sense if that was really the issue,
mhm.
how did it make the problem be more intensified? And if this is too general for you, look for areas where you feel like you can't win for losing. Look for areas like I like see I knew that was going to happen. I just can't I can't seem to get the results that I want to get, and where you're experiencing the snapback effect, where you're bouncing backwards. That's where you're going to find those XYZs is
Mhm.
in those areas because then the act of doing that, when whether you call it self beat up like I do and Wayne does, and stupid, 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 how could I do that, blah blah blah, and why did I spend so long digging the what was I doing as a kid, digging that mailbox post hole, what was I wasting all that time on? Well, that's a form of beat up, right? But that's the results of seeing that. So I think that you'll now I've talked myself right into a point where I don't know what my point was.
Well, and I want to riff off that slightly and go, even if you can just shift from being upset and still say the same words, but come at it from a different attitude of, say, curiosity, right? Because that's what I was going, whoa. Hearing you say those words that I'd said earlier about the digging the post hole, I'm like, that wasn't the attitude I came. I could totally hear how those words would be experienced differently if it was mad at myself. It was very much like, what was I doing? That's curious, just curiosity being applied into it can shift things so much. So,
Well, and that's a great lesson for, like, I projected that onto the situation based upon
right, back.
my unconscious conditioning, right?
Yeah.
So now we know where Joshua's got some issues, right? And and one of the reasons why Wayne's trained himself to become curious about those things is because of the work that he's done, and that he's chosen a when then to, so instead of whatever
Mm-hmm.
was, that because curiosity serves him.
Mm-hmm.
And if I could be so bold as to offer a piece of insight that may or may not be true for you, that you could try on or not, is is that a pattern to avoid, that is being curious? Does that let you then, oh, isn't that, like, oh, like I used to do that, yeah, but does that give you permission to stay doing that? Or
Mm.
is that
Interesting.
a, you know
Yeah.
or is that truly a, because sometimes I think we can get stuck, I know I can, in not like, I've made progress, I feel good, but now I really, like, I don't want to go the next step, and so I
Yeah.
want to hang out here a little bit. I'm not where I want to be yet, but it's a lot better than I used to be. So let me feel good about that, which is good.
Yeah.
But the point is to get to the next level where you really want to be.
Yeah. And I actually was wondering as you were asking, I was filling in the blanks as you were saying, can I offer? And I'm like, what if it's just to, I can go into curiosity rather than do the work, which is where you got eventually. And I'm like, oh yeah, look at that. I will ponder that and be curious about it and maybe do the work. Or
Well, or
go
you
do
could
the
just say,
play that's
"Hey,
not work.
isn't that
And
cool? Yeah, yeah, I did that. So what? I did that. If it's true, I mean, yeah,
yep.
that's true. Yes, I have done that as a way to avoid doing the work. Okay, cool. What's next?
Yep.
I mean, now,
Yep.
does it mean anything? Only if I say so. So plenty
Yep.
of good stuff. Until next
All
time.
right.
See ya. Oh yeah, sorry.